Oh, good morning. How are we doing? Let's see. Oh, I've got a nice fuzz buzz behind my shoulder. That's fun. Good morning, those coming in. Hello, hello. Hello, Yakub and Yasin. Yo, Susie, how you doing? Hopefully you're good. Hey, Brea, good to see you. Hey, Clement Gilly. I hope everyone's ready to smash the system today. Oh, yeah. Hey, Izzy. Good to see you. I hope we're all in an angry mood today. That's what we need. We need to channel the anger. Of course, Brea. If they want to. If they want to. You're all fans of anarchy. Well, that's good. We'll smash the system together. Maybe. Oh, you got a new backpack. Oh, very nice. That does sound good. You, Robert, you're making a magical penguin school. That sounds very anarchistic. I like it. I'm very well, Robert. Thank you very much. Bring your dad to philosophy day. Sounds excellent. What a thing to do. Hello, Beatrix. Good to see you. Good morning. We'll give everyone a minute or so to join up if they haven't already, and then we'll get kicked off. We've got a lot to get through this morning, it would seem. I'm not sure. I mean, I'll probably get distracted halfway through like usual, but we're going to try and get through a whole load of different styles of anarchism. Let's go. Good morning, Susanna. Lovely to see you. All right, let's bring up the screen then. No, do distract me. I enjoy it. It stops me distracting myself. Okay, so anarchism is our title today. It's all about anarchy, as in the philosophical and political system. Clem and Gilly don't want to smash the system. Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. Just do a protest instead. That's all right. Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about the political concept of anarchism. War monkeys? No, I don't even. We're going to start by looking at the political spectrum. We're going to have a look at the anarchist idea that most ain't more problems. We're going to ask who's the king of the anarchists, or queen, I suppose, the monarch of the anarcho monarch. Maybe that's a thing. Brea is cool. Hello, Oliver. Good morning. We're going to have a look at a few different types of anarchism. I tried to sort of pick a wide range, but without picking a stupidly wide range. So we're going to have a look at ideas of what classical anarchism is: green anarchism, anarcho-feminism, and anarcho-syndicalism. Those are the four that I've chosen. And then, because we're starting with this album cover, of course, from the Sex Pistols, which is a band, by the way, if you are young. But it's a nice representation of anarchism, because the Queen there, she's had her eyes ripped off, or at least, no, that sounds really horrible. She hasn't literally had her eyes ripped off. She's just had the picture of her eyes ripped out. Yeah, and her mouth, which symbolizes anarchism quite nicely, really. So we're ending up with It's Coming Sometime, or maybe. You're wondering what that was. Yeah, it's a classic. But yeah, when I think anarchism, you can't go much further than anarchy in the UK. All right, so let's kick off on the spectrum. To understand what anarchism is, we're going to have to understand the basics, at least, of the political spectrum, which I suppose most of you already do. But it's worth going over as a basic principle. Often, the political ideas of people, whether it's philosophers or your mate down the pub, all these political ideas, they fall somewhere on the left-right spectrum, often called left-wing, right-wing. You may have heard that. And here we've got a funky little diagram, which I could probably make a bit bigger, which shows some of the common political groupings. Yeah, that's right. So if you were, on Monday, we looked at the UK government, didn't we, in Key Stage 3? And I used this very same picture, but we're going to go quite a bit beyond this today. We're going to develop this out. Let's do it again. That would be weird. No, we're gonna start here, but we're gonna go off somewhere else. So our different political parties here, they can fit from left to right, or they can be somewhere in the middle. So in Britain, we have our main two political parties. We have the Conservative Party over here on the right wing, which means that they believe in small government, but quite authoritarian. Well, no, maybe not. Small government, giving people individual freedom, but still very much, controlled by the government. Yeah, from the top boys. That's it. If you go further right, you get to fascism, which is like an extreme form of conservatism, where there's a small government, but there's a huge threat of political violence or physical violence to make you do what you want. And that's where we add in ideas of like racism, and we get Nazis and thing. But then if you flip to the other end of the spectrum, to the left, you find the Labour Party, which at the moment in Britain is centre-left. Jeremy Corbyn was probably actually properly on the left when he was in charge of the Labour Party. But those guys, they're about big government and the people having more equality. I suppose equality is the important word on the left. Everyone being treated, correctly, everyone having the same kind of access, or at least opportunity to access resources and things like that. But if you go right to the far left, you end up with communism in its purest form. So in communism, we end up with a system where everything works according to the will, or no, maybe not the will, according to what is best for the people, if that's believable. So that's our spectrum. And on this spectrum, anarchy is on the far left, because anarchy believes that there is no room for a state at all. We don't need a government. We don't need a king, a queen. We don't need a parliament. We don't need anything other than ourselves. That's pure anarchy. But it's kind of weird, because this spectrum here isn't particularly useful, maybe, because there's a big difference between communism, as we've seen it in history, in places like the USSR or North Korea currently. You wouldn't call that anarchist. So it's strange that anarchism and communism, the way that we've seen it, would be in that group. So some people use a spectrum that looks a little bit more like this. And instead of looking at left to right, they just talk about freedom. So this one sort of flips us around a bit. If you've got absolutely no freedom, if you're just do what you're told all the time, and the government is always telling you what to do, like the Nazis did, oh, naughty Nazis, then you're over on, in this case, you're over on the left of this diagram, you're a fascist. But you could also be a communist, because in the USSR, that was how it worked. Yes, they were left-wing, and fascists are right-wing, but really, living in those two societies was pretty similar, because no one had any freedom. The leaders told everyone what to do and then shot you if you didn't do it. So that's not cool. I'm going to pin myself on the that's not cool side. If you go right to the opposite end, that's where we find anarchism here, which is total individual freedom. People can do whatever they want. Now, you may be thinking, that sounds scary, Jake. What if people want to stab me with knives? What if people want to set fire to my house? What if people want to come in and sort of go all on my birthday cake? I mean, that's not cool. But that's what anarchism is about, total individual freedom. We'll see if there's a way to have that in a safe way, I guess, today. There you are. That I can't believe you managed to spell in the chat. That's very good, Robert. Thank you. So yeah, that's what we're looking at today. Anarchism and how it fits with total freedom. And it's the opposite of these totalitarian regimes, whether that's extreme communism or extreme fascism. Anarchism is the opposite of that in some ways. All right. So let's start with the basic principle here. Mo state, mo problems. Anarchists believe, for a variety of different reasons, and it really can be a huge variety of different reasons, but they believe that the state, as we know it today in the modern world, and has been for a long time, is way too powerful. And by the state, I mean the government, the system of rules and laws and regulations and all that bump that comes down to us from our leaders, whether that's Napoleon in France or Boris Johnson right now in England. We got to do what the governments say. The governments have huge amounts of power over our lives. They make us do all the things that we have to do. They make us pay taxes. They form armies to protect us. They've got police forces that are constantly snooping into your business, trying to see what you're up to. Ooh, they've got security cameras. They've got, benefits they give to people, curtailing their freedoms. All this stuff comes down from the government. But you can go even further. And you can say, well, the governments, they're tied up with huge multinational corporations like Shell or BP, or even something like the World Health Organization telling everyone to wear masks and not die during COVID. Tyrants, I tell you. This is what anarchism is against, being told what to do, whether it's by an elected government, somebody who's taken power, a company that owns resources. I should probably say that I don't necessarily agree with everything I'm saying here. I'm just doing it from an anarchist perspective. Just feeling the anger, Robert. That's all. I'm feeling the anger that an anarchist might feel. Yeah. Smash up the system. Spit on someone's birthday cake. That'll teach them. Don't. Sorry, I'll get carried away. So if we look, here we've got a picture of Tiananmen Square back in the 80s, of big government against individual. I suppose this picture in some ways represents. But in this situation, the man here stopping the tanks in Tiananmen Square. Your mum is listening. She's saying she wasn't an anarchist. That's cool. Okay. Breyer points out you don't have to be angry to be an anarchist. I know, but maybe I've just got an internal rage today that I need to get out in the form of anarchist philosophy. I don't know. Rage monster. Thank you, Robert. So our tanks here, they represent the state, in China. And it's a good example because China, the obvious example is usually the Nazis for everything. But China works better maybe because China is a communist state. So in theory, it's on that far left alongside anarchism. But this shows us just how different it is to anarchism, because the state in China has complete control, almost complete control over its citizens. There is very little in the way of individual freedom as we would, understand it in Britain and the UK today. And although this guy, he stood in front of these tanks. I don't know if you've ever seen the videos, but he stands in front of the tanks, then he climbs on the tanks and starts hitting it with his shopping bags. It's this brilliant image that we see in the Western world of how an individual can stand up to massive amounts of power. But what really happened was the dude got ripped off the tank and he's still in prison today. He's been there for like 40 years now or whatever. It's not great. Which shows that in that case, this definitely isn't an anarchist state. This is a totalitarian communist state. Oh, now that's good, Brer. Can I show them? I won't show the videos because I don't want to be put on a blacklist by the Chinese government. It's illegal in China. Also, my technical skills aren't good enough to do it without making everything break. But you can look at them on YouTube. Just type in Tiananmen Square and you'll see him beating the tank with his bags. And it's very impressive, but also utterly futile is the point, because the state is just too big. Oh, spell it. Okay. How do you spell Tiananmen? Maybe I'm going to have to I'm going to have to Google it and see if I can spell it properly. Tiananmen. Is that it? Tiananmen. Tiananmen. I can't. Dyslexia doesn't help with this. Sorry about the dogs, by the way. They're going off on one. Maybe because they don't like the Chinese government. Shh, don't tell the Chinese government I said that. The dogs love them. Here we go. This is how you spell it. Tian An Men. There we go. Dog reveal. No, you don't want the dog in here. The dog is an anarchist. Both dogs are anarchists. Yeah. And we saw something from there at the tape. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's very good. Yeah, thanks, Izzy. Making me feel more confident. Nice. What an anarchist would say is that nobody has the right to drive a tank at you. Nobody has the right to then arrest you for hitting that tank with your shopping bags. Nobody has the right to put you in prison. No one has the right to tell you what to do ever. So stop it. Naughty. Grr. What? I don't know what you're talking about, Robert. Cats are anarchists. I think you're probably right, Bray. I think, but the dogs, yeah. The dogs and the cats are anarchists. Although my cats are a very different kind of anarchist to the dogs, which makes sense. So what do we do? We could say, well, let's have a government like we do in Britain today. Yeah, a relatively small government, far less intrusive than the government of China. Yeah, but there's still loads of stuff that the average person has to do. We've got to deal with taxes. So you've got to go to work to pay the government money so that they can what? You know, what are they going to do with it? Put on a show, pave some roads, supply a police force or an education system or a national health service. Who wants any of that? It's rubbish, would say an anarchist. But also, even in our relatively small state, because we've got a conservative government, the Queen is more useless. Oh, Magnus, don't be mean to the Queen. She's an old lady. Yeah, she's an anarchist at heart, I'm sure. Maybe. But even in this state, you know, people don't have true freedom. We've got a lot of freedom, but I can't walk down the street naked with a racist slogan painted on my bare chest with a handful of drugs. That's illegal. Yeah, for good reason, I'm going to say. Don't get me wrong. That isn't like a hidden desire of mine to do that. But I'm just saying there are things that I can't do because the government would clobber me if I tried to do it. Yeah, oddly specific. Yeah, as I was saying it, I was thinking, I'm not sure where this sentence is going or going to end. We'll just pretend it never happened. Yeah. What is an illegal desire of mine? I don't know. I'd quite like to dress up as a panda and then release all the animals out of all the zoos. That'd be quite fun. Not because I particularly care about the animals massively, just because I want to see the chaos that would create. That's a good idea, Brian. Eat all the cake. Yeah. So the problem is that the state is the problem. And as I said earlier, we can see the state is even larger than that. You know, at the moment, what are we all dealing with? We're dealing with rising fuel prices, rising food prices, a cost of living crisis, which some people say, well, that's the government's fault. And then some people say, well, actually, it's not the government's fault. It's world forces. It's just natural that everything costs so much right now. And an anarchist would say, well, what do you mean shut up? That's nonsense. Because we shouldn't have these powerful corporations sort of telling us what the price is of anything. We should be sourcing things ourselves and doing things on our own and not being reliant on, I don't know, some oil or grain that comes from a part of the world where there happens to be a war right now. Yeah, no, that's fair, Robert. I do care about animals too. Yeah. Oh, Magnus, don't tempt me. All right. Now, one slight problem with anarchism. Who's the king of the anarchists? Well, the answer is, of course, nobody, because they're anarchists. They don't believe in a government or a state, so there can be no king of the anarchists. It's an oxymoron. Ooh. And that leads to our sort of major problem that we've got to tackle with anarchism. If anarchism says there are no rules, or, well, maybe not no rules, but there's no government, there's no overarching system, we all sort ourselves out, then instantly it breaks down into hundreds, if not thousands, of different forms of people's idea of what anarchism is. Trying to actually find a solid definition for anarchism is really difficult. Even places in the world like Spain, where they have tried anarchism, they have conflicts over what the anarchism should be, could be. And, if you've got no one in charge or organizing anything, then it gets kind of, well, complicated. Bray's going for the anarchy with the cat. So here's a few different styles. We're just going to pick on 4 of these to have a look at, I suppose, today. But it's good to see that there is a bit of and this isn't, this is just a random image I found on the internet. There's loads more types than this. But you've got anarcho-communism, which is essentially communism where you strip away all levels of government. The means of production, which is a very important concept within communism, is handed over to the workers, who will just sort of naturally and out of their own good sort of moral compasses, let's say, will work together to make sure that everything's good. Does the cat one just mean strikes? No, we're gonna look in that one in a bit more detail in a minute. Anarcho-syndicalism. We'll come to that. We've then got anarcho-collectivism, which is very similar because they're all quite similar, but that's more focused on people joining together in small communities where they pool resources and skills, and they sort of work almost with, like, I don't know, micro governments in a way, but not quite. Then you've got anarcho-syndicalism, which is very similar to anarcho-collectivism, but it's got the idea that we've got sort of a network, maybe, of individual islands of anarchism, these people in their little different syndicates that will somehow connect naturally together, like mycelium in the roots of trees. Nyam, 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 nyam. You've then got Proudhonian mutualism, which is everyone just sort of mutually gets along. I don't know much about that one, but we'll see Proudhon in a little bit. We've then got individualist anarchism, sometimes known as egoist anarchism, which is also this idea that actually the other types of anarchism are far too structured, I mean, joining together in groups or syndicates, that's a little bit extreme. That's almost like being part of a country, and countries are bad. So instead, why don't I just be myself and you be yourself, and hopefully we won't kill each other. Lone wolf anarchism. Yeah, basically, I guess. We then got anarcho-pacifism, which is, let's get rid of the government, let's smash up the system, but let's do it without hurting anyone, which is kind of cool. I like anarcho-pacifism. It basically says, well, when the government, how does the government work? Well, essentially, underneath everything that the government does, there is the threat of violence, yeah? There has to be. If I get like a minor telling off by the police, yeah, I get a speeding fine or something, and they send me the letter and they say, you need to pay £100 because you were speeding, you naughty scallywag. And I'm like, hey, it wasn't me, I can't even drive. But they're like, no, just do it anyway. But anyway, I decide not to pay the fine. What are they going to do? Probably fine me more, write more threatening letters. That's a little bit of violence right there. But it's okay, I'm going to ignore it because I don't believe I was speeding, because I haven't even got a car. But the government get more insistent. They say they've got photos. They say that I wasn't in a car. They say I was speeding on the back of a penguin. I mean, it's hard to disprove. And so I say no. And they say yes. And I keep saying no. And they take me to court. And I'm like, still not going to pay your stupid money. Eventually, if I keep refusing to pay, somebody's going to punch me, and they're probably going to put me in prison, which is an act of violence. And there you go. I've just lost my freedom because I refused to pay money for a speeding fine. Yeah, maybe that's what I was doing, Bray. I was speeding to save a baby kitten from a lion. Yeah. So anarcho-pacifists will say, look, we need to stop the violence inherent in the system by leading the way, by never using violence. So we'll just completely ignore the government. We're not going to, a lot of these other forms of anarchism are about, violent revolution. Let's rise up, let's literally smash the system, let's kill a load of folks, and let's, establish our new type of world. Whereas the pacifist, the anarcho-pacifist would say, no, we're just going to refuse to do things, but we're never going to retaliate. We're never going to get angry. We're never going to, well, we might get angry, but we're not going to get physical. We're not going to get violent. That one rose up just before World War II. And a lot of people in Britain and America sort of went along with anarcho-pacifism, basically said, I'm not joining no war. That's mad thing, which it turned out it was. We've then got green anarchism, which we'll talk about a bit more in a minute as well. That is anarchism based on the environment. Anarchistically planting flowers in the state's dirt. Yeah. Then we've got anarcho-privatism, which is similar, I suppose, to individualism, but more sort of focused on economics. We've got anarcho-feminism, which I just love the way that it's called anarcho-feminism instead of anarcho-feminism, because all the others are anarcho something, like anarcho-syndicalism. But of course, this is anarcha because it's female. There you go. Which we'll look at a bit more too in a minute. Anarcho-feminism is about how there is more than just the power of the state that we need to get rid of. There is also the power of the man, like literal man this time, not like the, yeah. And then we've got LGBT anarchism, which is, or sometimes known as queer anarchism or anarcho-queerism, which is let's be very gay about things, I suppose. But at the same time, let's smash the government who look down on us for being gay. I think I probably summarized that in a silly way. But that's essentially where we're going. There are loads of others. There's transhuman anarchism, who talk about how we shouldn't even have, I don't know, species definition, let alone gender definition or sexuality definition or government definition or class definition. We should all just be free to express our feelings about the world at all times. Like a spider, sensing all the lovely things around us with our little feelers and feet. Which goes to show that all spiders are anarchists. If you don't let men have power over, then you don't. Oh, super, yeah. It's a hard one. All right, so we're going to take a few of these and we're going to look at them in more detail. We're going to start with one that isn't actually on this list, but I suppose Proudhonian. Yeah, this guy here. This is Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, and I have invented basically as the anarchism. That is how he spoke, obviously. It's brilliant, Magnus. Space Marine Successor chapter logos. That'd be so fun. Back in like second or third edition, they did have a group called a chapter called the Rainbow Warriors, which we'll have a look at in a minute. His beard is not as good as Marx, that's true. So here we've got Karl Marx on the left and we've got Pierre-Joseph Proudhon on the right. He does have a line through his face. I think he's wearing glasses. I think it's supposed to be glasses. They're just very small wire spectacles, aren't they? But it does just look like the artist has drawn a line across his face. Yeah. So anarchism sort of became a thing, and you could argue it's always been a thing, it's been an idea, but I suppose putting it into a way in which, thanks Magnus, you're cheering me up, putting it in a way in which people would like talk about it as anarchism. Probably one of the first people to do that was Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. Now, Karl Marx was very important in the 19th century. He developed his idea of communism, which nowadays I suppose we call it Marxism, but it's left-wing political theory, and it was he who sort of led to Pierre-Joseph being developing his ideas, because Marx was quite a talking point. He comes up with this idea about the workers being or potentially being in charge of the means of production and being able to create a world for themselves where they are going to be, free and have access to all the things in life that they need, including food and water and a sense of safety, and also work, because Marx saw work as something which is like an inherent human need. Yeah, the will to work is important. Just like a bee, says Marx. It's like a bee. It's like a little bee. It's just moving around. And the bee, no one says to the bee, you must go and do the work now. The bee just does it. It's like, woo, got a flippity wings. Strappy bee, just does what he wants. That's what Marx thought that we all were. We're just, yeah, Breyer points out, though, that bees are controlled by a queen. That's true. I mean, Marx maybe didn't notice that. Maybe he just wasn't much of an entomologist. Hang on, is that entomologist? Is that skin or bugs? I don't know. I think it's bugs. He wasn't a bee man. I mean, look at him. If he went near a hive of bees, they'd get all up in his beard. He'd be stung all over his chin. Oh, they'd make honeycomb in his lovely curls. Oh, and that's true. Yeah, okay, Breyer's just destroying Marx for us here. So the bees have a hive mind, so they are the queen. Does that make them anarchist? If there is only one thing, then and entomology is insects. Good. Which one's the skin? Is that dermatology? His beard would be a hive. He'd be just walking around dripping honey, chatting to everyone about communism as honey just drips down onto his chest. Oh, Marx, you went wrong. But no, so Pierre Joseph, he comes up with the classical idea, what we call the classical idea, of anarchism, the idea that we can go even further than Marx. He agrees with Marx on some important things, and the main thing is, who should control that means of production. In the 19th century, we're living in an industrializing world, especially in Europe, so and America. But there's this great big sort of conversation about how things should work. We're living in capitalist economies with some very rich people at the top and some very poor people at the bottom. And those rich people have almost complete control over the poor people. But then, says Marx, who has the real power? Is it the rich people telling the workers to work, or is it the workers who are working and actually getting something done? So it's a quick little step from that to thinking, well, what if we just got rid of those guys at the top? I mean, they're not very nice. They smell a bit. They're quite sort of annoying. They have funny accents, and they're constantly forcing us to do stuff. We make loads of stuff, and then they buy it and they use it, and we don't even get to see it. So let's just have the workers in charge. And if we're going to get rid of all the rich folks, well, who are the government if not the rich folks? We'll get rid of them too. That'll give us more freedom, and then we won't have to worry about paying taxes, which will make us richer. But hang on, how about we don't even have taxes? Because let's get rid of money, because money is inherently an unfair system. So if we all just sort of make stuff for each other, like birthday cards with pasta stuck on the front, or like daisy chains, then or a hat, then maybe we'll be good. We can just share those things out. The hat maker can make the hat. The chicken owner can produce the eggs. Chicken owner? I think I'm going to say farmer, actually. The miller can mill just for the love of milling. And, the baker can bake a beautiful cake. We just, as Oliver says, we just have a skills exchange. We make sure that everyone's just helping everyone else out. Sounds wonderful. Sounds utopian. Of course, for poor old Marx, his ideas of communism ended up, in about 100 years in the Soviet Union, which was pretty gnarly. Oh, that's true. Breyer points out that the chickens produce the eggs. No, because the workers have the means of production, right? Not the chickens. The chickens don't have the means of production. They just happen to produce. Oh, are chickens anarchists? I mean, they don't have a. Do they have a queen? Is there a queen chicken? I don't know. Anyway, so that's the classic idea of anarchism, which we've pretty much been talking about so far. A queen hen. I suppose it would be a queen hen, wouldn't it? Let's take a look at the Greenpeace. Greenpeace not really anarchist, but I think it's a nice representation here. That's true. Leah says there's a pecking order for hens. That's true. Yeah, so even they have a social structure, don't they? They're not all equal. Are there any animals that are all equal? That don't have a hierarchical system? No, I know, Robert. I can't think of any. Maybe naked mole rats. Naked mole rats are an interesting one. They're the only mammal that lives in a sort of hive situation. So they have a queen, but there's the kind of hive mind thing going on as well. No other mammals live like that. And interestingly, naked mole rats live about 3 times longer than similarly sized rodents of other species, which makes some people think that communism is essentially makes you live longer. I'm not sure that's true, so don't quote me on that one. Space bears, perhaps, Robert. Maybe space bears don't have a queen. Maybe they've outgrown that. Oh, that's cool. Danielle says the schools of fish, they kind of have a hive mind, but with no queen. That's true. They just sort of move around together, don't they? There's beautiful shoals, just naturally. Maybe that's more anarchistic. I like that. Yeah, that's a good example. So green anarchism then is all about, being anarchist, so not having any rules and regulations, but instead of just everyone just sort of being loosey-goosey about everything and just doing what they want, everything sort of naturally or with some kind of incentive leads towards making the world a better place for the environment. Yeah, so farming, doing agriculture in more sensible and sustainable ways, not using fossil fuels, protecting huge areas of the earth from human touches and all that kind of stuff, which is very admirable. And I've chosen here the Greenpeace ship, the Rainbow Warrior, which would go around attacking and stopping and interfering with whaling ships back in the 1990s, I guess. I don't know if the Rainbow Warrior is still going. I think it might have been explodinated, or maybe the French government attacked it. I can't remember. But Greenpeace is an organization, a group of people who club together to fight, literally fight for the rights of animals and plants and the environment. So it would be a very small step from Greenpeace to making that into a sort of political system. Although even calling anarchism a political system is horrible. It's hard because it's not a system. Yeah. Thank you, Susanna. Going back to the animals and dominance here. Cats don't have a proper hierarchical system, but some are generally dominant over others. Yeah, they do push each other around a bit, don't they? Yeah. And since Magnus reminded me of it, this might not mean anything to most of you, but this is just for Magnus and myself, really. Here's a Rainbow Warrior Space Marine. Oh, no, it didn't come up. There you are. A Rainbow Warrior, just the way a Space Marine should be. That's definitely not anarchism. Yeah, you see. Could green anarchists be living up to God's animal steward thing? Now, that's an interesting question. As I'll read that. I just muttered that, didn't I? Brea says, could green anarchists be living up to God's animal steward thing? And yes, so there are also groups of religious anarchists. So you get Christo anarchism or, Buddho anarchism. I don't know if that's the correct name for it. But, if from a Christian point of view, there's definitely a hierarchy, isn't there? There's God and there's humans. There's a definite hierarchy there. But what the problem is that if you're a Christian, say, and you believe that God is in charge of everything and God has made the planet as he wants, then you could look at that and say, well, why would God have created kings and prime ministers and presidents? That sounds like someone playing God. So how about we just, get rid of the human sort of leadership, let's say, and we just devote our lives to the leadership of God. So on the human level, we're all equal and we all just work together. But, there is still a hierarchy there, but it's sort of a spiritual hierarchy instead. What if God isn't real? Well, then that would be a problem for sure. But, the Christian anarchists who believe in that, they have strong faith in God. So to them, that's a pointless question, I guess. Yeah, that's a good one. So Brea here is bringing back my best friend now, William Blake. Yeah, he was Christian, but he was his own kind of Christian, and he didn't really like the leadership of the church or the system or the structure of the church. So I suppose in his own way, I mean, he wasn't a very social person, at least not politically social. So maybe he wouldn't have fit in that too well. But there's a lot of philosophers who fit like that. Søren Kierkegaard, who believed in Jesus, with an almost fanatical devotion, but absolutely hated Christianity and the church. You know, he believed that Jesus had a message and you didn't need to be told it by a load of dudes in funny hats, which may or may not be true. Sometimes a funny hat really does help, though. That's a good question. Anya asks, are there communities that have successfully followed anarchism? There are, but on a small scale. I think the only place that you're going to find anarchist societies today is if you go to Spain. Spain has, ever since the Civil War, well, ever since before their Civil War, they've had a really good long history of left-wing thinking and community work. So there are some towns in Spain that are led by communists, communist mayors, and there are other communities which are pure anarchistic, anarcho-syndicalist generally is where they fit into, as far as I know, although I'm not very au fait with what's going on in Spain at the moment. So yeah, you could go to small communities in Spain and see anarchism in action. There's never been a country, though, that's embraced anarchism as a. There have been countries without governments, failed states like Sudan a few years back, but that's not political. That's not like philosophical anarchism. That's just, yeah. They are successful communities in Spain. Yeah, they have some brilliant places, but they're small scale. That's the thing. There are anarchist communities in Spain that have been existing since the 1940s, at least, if not before. So it can work on a small scale. What it's never been able to do, or no one's ever been able to try, is doing it on a huge sort of national level. So could you turn the whole of the UK into an anarchist state? I mean, that's almost an oxymoron in itself, so I don't know. But no, people have managed it on small scales for sure. You can look at other left-wing sort of things like the kibbutzes in Israel and stuff. Not really anarchist, but definitely very, very left-wing. When was the Spanish Civil War? The 1930s, just before the Second World War, basically, in between those two wars. Yeah, it's Voltairine. We like Voltairine. So Voltairine is going to pop up when we talk about anarcho-feminism. The angry girl. Angry, but also awesome. Anarcho-feminism is an interesting one, and it really does fit in if you watched that, or if you were there for the one with Voltaire in philosophy. But anarcho-feminism is all about taking the power away from the state, but also within that, and as part of that, seeing the patriarchy as a symbol of control. Yeah, so it might not be literally the state, but we don't have to imagine too hard to think of the state as very male-driven. Yeah, we've had 2 female prime ministers in the history of Britain. Even using the old monarchy system, we've only had a handful of female queens. Feminine power politically isn't expressed very much and hasn't been. Yeah. So in the early 20th century, a lot of women started to write about how anarchism could be used as a way to, since we're breaking the system anyway, how about we get rid of the patriarchy? And one of the big things surrounding that would be the abolishment of marriage. Because in a marriage, the man, especially back then, the early 20th century, the man has complete control over the woman, tells the woman what to do, forces the woman to do stuff. I mean, no wonder that Emma Goldman looks so grumpy in this picture. She's got a lot to put up with. So bringing down the idea of the patriarchy, the male ownership, and then living in sort of nice, peaceful groups, maybe of women, but probably more likely mixed gender, to be fair, could be a good way forward. Now, Voltairine, she's a bit interesting because she fits with that basic mold. Yes, she doesn't like marriage in particular. She sees that as abhorrent. We said that she doesn't even like the idea of being trapped as a mother. It's essentially she just gave her baby away and didn't really see it for the rest of his life. Because she believed in some form of ego or individualistic anarchism, where people should just make up their own minds about everything and they should be free to do what they want. The reason Voltairine doesn't necessarily fit in with anarcho-feminism is because she didn't see herself as a feminist. So I don't think she'd call herself an anarcho-feminist, because she would say that the very concept of gender is ridiculous and not something we want to be constrained by. So she's often seen as what we call, what do they call it? An anarchist without adjectives is one way of putting it. Yeah, why are we fighting for women's rights? That's ridiculous. Let's just get rid of the system and let's just all live as nice people. Yeah, which I quite admire that, although I don't think I'd want to get into an argument with her because she's scary. She's a scary lady. Mm-hmm. And then we move on to anarcho-syndicalism. The reason I picked anarcho-syndicalism is mainly because this one seems to be, I don't know, there's something about anarcho-syndicalism that seems to be in the sort of, in the zeitgeist. You hear people talking about this one where you don't necessarily hear them talk about others. Now, it might just be me that hears people talking about anarcho-syndicalism, perhaps. It might just be that the term has become quite popular and people don't really understand what it is. I don't know. But anarcho-syndicalism is about breaking down nations in particular. Yeah, all anarchy doesn't want a state or state government, but anarcho-syndicalism seems to really focus on that. Let's have no borders. Let's not have, get rid of the concept of Europe and France and Germany and Poland, and it'll all just be one place. But within that, we break down into small groups of around 100 people. So probably the best way to think of anarcho-syndicalism is something on the scale of a medieval village. Or I can picture the scene, the grubby people wandering around, digging in the dirt, planting carrots, chasing after greased pigs, that kind of thing. Super fun. But with one major difference between medieval society and anarcho-syndicalism. Oh, Magnus, I almost wish I could take down my green screen and just show you the billions of models and wonderful Warhammer around me. It's my jam, Magnus. Has been since I was 10 years old. But anyway, that's irrelevant. So anarcho-syndicalism is where we have those, if you imagine those little medieval villages, about 100 people, but we get rid of the feudal system. Yeah, so there's no one at the top. There's no king. There are no lords. There are no knights with their threats of literal violence. And instead, we just have the people. And depending on where your village is, would sort of shape the way that little society sort of functioned. Yeah. So let's say we've got a little village near the coast, then there might be a lot of fishing going on. And the main sort of production that village does is fish and fish-based products, perhaps. But then there might be another little village-sized syndicate, who live next to a river and they're all about providing fresh water, or these guys over here have good farmland, and these guys over here, they have orchards or whatever. And then and this is where it maybe gets tricky, if you had all those little syndicated areas, they would naturally, say the philosophers, they would naturally just start sharing with each other. Yeah, so the fish guys would be trading with the farming guys for the carrots, and the carrot guys would be trading with the river guys for the fresh water. And, it would just work itself out without anyone being in charge. Now, some anarcho-syndicalists, they say, there's two ways to do anarchism. Let's put it that way, or possibly three if we talk to the anarcho-pacifists. But you've got the revolutionary way of doing it. Everyone rises up. We literally, through graphic, horrible violence, we kill, the members of the government, or, we tear down the symbols of oppression around us. That's one way of doing it, revolutionary anarchism. And then you've got the idea behind a more sort of peaceful transition towards anarchism. Yes, the lion way, as Nietzsche would say, be the lion. Be true to yourself. But the downside with that, and there are many anarchists who say, well, if we did that, if we went completely violent and we smashed it up, then history has told us that after these great big revolutions, what generally happens is we end up with a more authoritarian government than we started with. Yeah. Look at the French Revolution, sort of look at the American Revolution, the Iranian Revolution. You look at these times when people do smash the system and it actually ends up worse. So there's a lot of anarchists who would say, no, that's a really bad idea. We don't want that revolution. Instead, what we want is a gradual step-by-step process that leads us naturally to anarchism. Yeah, no, that's it, Bray. That's another good point. Once you've torn everything up, there's nothing left. So how does society even function then? Yeah, that's a very good point. Does that look like the Avengers sign? Maybe the Avengers are anarchists. I don't know much about the Avengers, but they might be. I mean, the Incredible Hulk, he don't listen to no laws. He big and green and mean. Probably, I think. I don't know enough about them. So these different groups of people, they might say, well, look, instead of then attacking and smashing and using extreme violence, which of course is what anarchism is kind of against anyway, how about we just gradually make a smaller and smaller state? And we don't like that state, but if we work with the state and start to shrink it down, so we take away government responsibility for just a few things first, and then maybe a few years later we take away government responsibility for more things. Clem and Gilly say the Avengers have a leader. That's not right then. No. Okay. Brett says the Avengers, they definitely, their power is certainly based on the threat of violence, isn't it? That's all they really got. I guess. Yeah. Now this is true, and Josh says they don't believe in the laws, but they try and help people. So that is quite anarchistic, I suppose. Good anarchists. They are the law. Ooh. So instead, we slowly disassemble the state. We pull it apart little piece by little piece. And eventually we're left with such a small government that we can just sort of flick it over. No one will even notice it'll be so small. And boom, we find ourselves in a world of anarchist, syndicates all working together. And it's a nice idea, We could do it in Britain very easily. You would just, I suppose it would be, you'd just sort of have some, and then I don't know. I always wonder, I can imagine in the anarcho syndicate that you could have a lot of like farmers and stuff merrily farming, and you might have your miners mining and all that kind of stuff, your fishermen fishing. But then who's going to be the chartered accountant? I suppose you wouldn't need one because there is no money and therefore there's no accountancy. And who's going to make the computers work? Maybe you don't need them either. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I mean, who's going to empty the bins? Someone's got to do it, but if we're all just sort of doing what we want to do, does anyone want to empty bins? It's tricky. Robert says, just kick Boris out. I mean, that might be one step towards anarchism. There's a long way to go. You could share the bin job. That's true. So you could have small councils, so like micro governments. So let's say we've got our villages of 100 people or so, and let's say within each of those villages there are 10 people that sort of organize activity. But then of course you're getting near a state, aren't you? It's tricky. They're just micro states, so it's hard. And to be honest, anarchists, they cannot agree on anything because, well, it's about individualism. So how could you ever agree with anyone? Yeah, exactly, Robert. That's kind of leading, isn't it? So it's really, really hard to imagine how it would work. Probably easier to imagine it going step by step and get, just government getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears, than a revolution that just instantly switches the switch to anarchism. Yeah, that's a good one, Robert. Amish people, I suppose they do live in small communities, ruled over by like small councils, don't they, and leaders. So maybe that's the way to go, sort of looking into that. But of course, they've got their sort of religious connections and anti-technology and stuff. And there's a problem. Clement Giddy says, what if all these syndicates, these little villages in our example, these little syndicates, what if they group together and become really powerful and then kick them, beat up all of the other syndicates and take them all over? And well, we're back where we started, aren't we? We've got a strong state again. So it's really, really difficult. And then they start a war against another group of syndicates. It's just you've lost it by that point, haven't you? I guess if we go back far enough in history, were the Neanderthals, were they anarchists? Maybe, I suppose. We don't know. We don't have any evidence of like early hominids and their any kind of government. So maybe that would suggest that actually anarchism is our natural state anyway. Yeah, that's true. Humans cannot be happy with what they have. And Marx would say that's because they have the will to work and to produce. Excuse me. So, where do we get to? I don't know. We've got a picture of Sid and Nancy. That's all. So, right now, it's a strong start to a song. This is lyrics, by the way, in the corner there. I am an antichrist, which is a strong statement to make. And I am an anarchist. Nice. Don't know what I want. That's a problem. I'm going to say that's a problem, Mr. Sid Vicious. I don't think that's great. But I know how to get it. Well, that's good. I want to destroy passerby. I feel like I've lost the thread with the Sex Pistols on this one. But this is from a song called Anarchy in the UK. Yeah, very famous song. It's quite nice. And it was very punk. Yeah, the whole idea behind this band. Shigaraki, what does that mean? I don't know what that means, Oliver, sorry. But the sort of common view of anarchism that people have, I think, probably traces back to the 1980s and the punk movement and all that kind of stuff. They are looking at, they're just looking very, very messed up, aren't they? Snarling. By the way, I don't want to spoil anything, but Sid Vicious had 2 eyes. He's wearing that eye patch to look cool because he wants to be like a pirate. I mean, it's sad, really. Well, why are they pouncing at the camera? Because, well, I suppose that's the problem. Yeah. So these are famously punkish people who wanted to get rid of the system. But I think this first verse of the song gives another problem about anarchism. I don't know what I want. Yeah, what is anarchism? It's so hard to actually pin down, and because everyone has their own idea about it. So we can't work together to make anarchism because by its very definition, we can only really have our own idea of what it should be. And that means that it's very, very difficult to ever get it off the ground. And the whole idea behind this punk movement and the band and Sid Vicious himself was that, it was about striking back against society, which we haven't talked about so much today. We focus more on the government, but it's striking back against society and the rules and regulations and the traditions that we have to live by. And so they're going to wear really bad clothes. They're going to wear eye patches when they don't even need to medically. They're going to put on way too much blusher and lipstick. They're going to, unfortunately, then take a lot of drugs. And one of them kills the other, and then the one that killed the other kills themselves. So it all ends up in a terrible mess. Sounds like a rogue trader. Yeah, that is like a movie. Yeah, the story of Sid and Nancy is tragic and terrible, but it also maybe is a warning about anarchism. I don't know. They had their whole thing was no limits, and well, they both died very young. Yeah, because they had no limits, perhaps, and that led them to things like drug addiction. Which I'm not saying all anarchists will become drug addicts, but sometimes there are things that you just can't fight back against. And an addiction to horrible, nasty drugs is probably one of those. You can't philosophically defeat that. Sometimes things are just too powerful to stand against. I don't know where I'm going with this. Thank you. Brea is going to rescue it. Brea saw a definition for anarchism that is just self-governance. Yeah, that could be fine. It's just I mean, that is legit, Brea. It's just, how do you do that as part of a system? If everyone's running around like Sid and Nancy, just intentionally making a mess of everything and kicking everything apart and, looking like they do here. I mean, how do we get a functioning society out of that? That's the problem. So ideas on a postcard. Send your ideas for how to make an anarchist utopia to me. No more than 50 words, please. And we'll solve this one together, guys. It'd be great. Maybe it's impossible, maybe it is, or maybe not. I mean, in that song, it does say it's coming sometime in reference to anarchy in the UK. So who knows? Maybe they were visionaries, and maybe in 100 years we'll all be sat in our little syndicates just having a lovely time. I'd like to think so. Be pretty good. That's it, Brea. Brea points out here that we just have to hope that Plato was right. And wise people are inherently good, and they know what that is. So maybe it comes down to what we think about humans. If we think that humans are wonderful things who are capable of doing this, working together in harmony, then why not? But if we don't have that much faith in humanity, maybe not. Maybe anarchy isn't for us. I don't know. Anyway, I've got to go. So thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully that gave you some things to think about. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great one, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Blah. Anarchy.